Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Sun is Coming podcast. I'm here with my co-host, Kaleb.
Hello, hello.
And my favorite, Nikki / Nicholas, as I like to call you.
Yes. Cal.
And you call me Cal.
I do.
I've told many, many people that I call you Nicholas. And they're like, that seems like not very nice. I'm like, I don't think she takes it like that.
No, I don't.
But, your name is Nikki Lucas and Nicholas. It makes a lot of sense.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah,
Okay.
It makes a lot of sense.
Yeah,
Works.
I got it. That makes sense.
So it's great to have you.
It's good to be here.
We haven't really hung out and talked probably since I left staff at Christ Community and you were my boss. And
It's true.
So you've got lots of stories about Caleb that we are excited to hear about.
It was a beautiful season. I miss him very much. But
Yeah.
Did he drink as much ghost
Where are you going
energy
there?
drink? Did he drink as much? No,
Yeah,
that's
right.
not what I meant. As
Full
much
stop.
ghost energy drink as he currently does.
Guess what? I don't think that you drank that back then.
I didn't discover
You were
it until
LaCroix. It was LaCroix.
LaCroix.
That seems so much healthier for you,
Yeah.
frankly.
Mhm. He drank so much LaCroix. He would frequently go back from his office to the fridge.
Yes.
He was spending so much money on LaCroix. The entire team was that we bought a machine.
I know. I tried to get it here.
Yeah. That was literally they just stock it. And so
Mhm.
the amount of money we've saved, people walk in and be like, wow, that's really excessive. You bought a machine with
We're
bubbly in
saving
it.
money.
No, actually we saved a ton of money
Wow.
by not going to Sam's Club.
What a
and-
contribution.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So everybody, you're welcome. It is really good. So funny story about Ghost.
Yes.
Uh,
I still have never tried it, frankly.
it's so good.
I won't.
Every flavor is amazing.
No.
Okay. Anyways, I happen to follow the marketing director on Instagram. His name was Johnny Holster or something like that. He's like a
Johnny,
content
if
creator.
you'd like to be on the podcast, just let
Dude.
us know.
Mm.
Yes.
If you
He
wanna
lives in-
give
he lives
him
in
free
Chicago.
Ghost.
Okay.
Oh, even better.
He lives in
Johnny, you
Chicago.
definitely should come on the podcast.
My wife and I were coming back from a mini trip a couple weeks ago, and we flew through Houston, and we were like, I'm gonna miss this flight, and we almost missed it coming back through customs, and I'm going very fast. Cassie's having a hard time keeping up with me in the airport, unfortunately, and I go to the bathroom right before I get on the plane, and I'm like, I'm pretty sure that's Johnny Holster in the bathroom with me. But I got weird and I didn't say anything. Also, I didn't feel like the bathroom was the right
Yeah,
place
probably
to
not.
have a
Yeah.
conversation
Weird.
with him. But I'm like, oh, I bought your LUTs, for content stuff. So anyways, he's a cool dude. He's very tall.
Yeah, you had
Johnny, if you want to be on the podcast, we'd love to have you.
had a little fan moment there, didn't you?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it doesn't really happen very much.
That is a good
but
story, though.
It was
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll have to follow him on
He was sitting
Instagram.
in 21C. It's my normal seat, but
Mhm.
Amazing.
So
Good
you were
thing.
mad at him.
okay. Anyways, Ghost Energy, if you want to sponsor us, we'd
Yep.
love to have you.
There you go.
Okay, back to Christ Community things.
Yeah.
So you've been there a very long time.
Yes.
You were my sounding board that I got to sit in your office and say lots of things, good and bad, and
Yeah.
work through lots of things. And you were always very calm and reassuring and talked me off a cliff I think I told Caleb that.
Mhm.
I'm like, yeah, you talked me off a cliff many times,
Mm.
which is great. And that's ministry. And that's exactly why we, started this podcast, because we both experienced that and experienced amazing, incredible things in ministry and really challenging things. And
Mhm.
we got to walk through lots of those fun things together. So I'm glad you're here.
I'm glad to be here.
So you've been at Christ Community for a long time. What
Mhm.
has your role looked like over
Yeah.
some different seasons of that period?
Well, I've been at Christ Community for 16 years, so I started attending there.
So many
I
years.
know it's a lot of years. I started attending there in 2008. And I was attending there for about 6 months, and then I auditioned to be on the worship team. And did the audition. I played one time on stage at our central campus, and
Okay.
then I was like, this is too much pressure. I don't want to do that. But that specific night, the night of the audition, I met a woman by the name of Sarah Emerson,
Mhm.
who was there as their creative arts producer at the time. She introduced herself to me and just tucked me down what I call just this production journey,
Mm.
and taught me all about the ins and outs of producing services and planning services. And I served under her for about 6 years, just volunteering, producing, stage managing, all the things. And decided when I was there to go back to school. I had graduated high school and had no idea what I wanted to do with life, and decided, okay, I think the reason why I never decided or landed on like one thing was because I was supposed to do all the things that I wanted to do through church ministry. So storytelling, art, like creative stuff, all of it happened here. So went back to Moody, got a degree in biblical studies and leadership, did an internship with creative arts there, 6 months. And after that internship, I got my first part-time job in their communications team doing, what was I doing? I was a digital media specialist. That was a long time ago, guys. Digital media specialist. So social media app website. About 6 months into that role, I think, around that, Sarah left Christ Community to go be the creative pastor at Soul City Church.
We just had John Jorgensen on yesterday.
Yeah, they're buds.
Yeah.
And it was like, they came to me and were like, okay, well, you're the only person who knows how to do this. So they brought me in an interim role. And so I was like half and half communications and creative arts for probably about 2 years. And then after that, I came on full-time in creative arts. And I was their volunteer coordinator. I was their production, their project manager, their production director. And then when the then creative arts pastor moved into a different team in Christ Community, Kaleb came in and I moved into the creative arts pastor role. And that's been my trajectory over the course of 16 years. But I've been on staff for 10 years, just over 10 years.
That's crazy.
So it's been a wild ride. Lots of opportunities where people allowed me to step into things that I didn't think I was ready for. But I've showed up and we made it happen. So
that's awesome. Yeah, it's been, I kind of forgot that all those changes moved around like as I was coming on. Because I'm trying to figure out when this would have been. This would have been 2015 is when I interviewed there the first time.
Okay.
I don't remember if you were at the interview or not.
No.
I think Sarah was there. I don't remember. But so much changed even from then to when I came on staff in 2020. And it's such a unique, I think it's a super unique church. You're in a really interesting area of the suburbs of Chicago. You have, we had campuses all the way back to DeKalb, and people were like, where in the world is DeKalb? But it's a big team. And what does because I actually don't even know, what is the structure now? Because you're there, you have Zach, we have other production people, there's worship people. And I thought about you guys, and the reason I'm asking this is because I was on a call with the church the other day, and they're like, what do you typically see in the org chart of, large churches? I'm like, well, it's as wide of a spectrum as you could possibly imagine. But I feel like when I was at Christ Community, the structure was I liked it. Like it was a great middle ground, but I don't know what it looked like today.
Yeah, if I'm remembering the timing right, I think we had made the shift to when Clayton, so he's our teaching pastor right now, when he was a creative arts pastor, he had moved into kind of like a senior director position. Was that happening when you were still there? Yeah. So he became the senior director over communications and creative, because before our teams were separated.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
And so it was like, okay, well, let's put the creative teams together. And it really made sense. And it was a great move because we'd been hoping for that for a long time. And so that's still the way it exists right now. So right now, Zach is our senior director, just like former worship leader, still leads worship with us, just great guy. So he's over our communications and creative arts team right now. And then I'm the creative pastor. I report to him. Our communications director reports to him. And then worship, like the central team, reports to me. So that's like front of house audio, like audio director, our production director, video broadcast, and our St. Charles South Elgin worship pastor reports to me right now. And then we have a central production director that kind of goes around to our different campuses and trains and just kind of helps in those areas technically. So that's how it works right now. And then our worship pastors that are each one of our campuses, they're like a dotted line to me, to where then they report directly to their campus pastor. So that's kind of how the structure works. And it works really well. It's a well-rounded structure.
Maybe talk more about that, because you mentioned that kind of synergy had been something you'd been hoping for a while.
Yeah.
In my own church context, we went through that exact same transformation of like bringing those creative disciplines together.
Yeah.
Whereas, for a long time, it was sort of, creatives over here, production worship over here. In some churches, it's even more. It's like creative communications, production, worship, you know, and
they're so separate. Yeah.
so like for you guys in your context, what were the things that you saw that made you say, hey, we want to bring these things together? These are the alignment bits. This is where we're able to kind of leverage the different strengths of these groups in a more team environment. Because I think a lot of people listening might be in a situation where they actually are separate and they're not under the same umbrella.
Yeah, I think for us, we saw that. So I'll give you an example. When I was working on the communications team back in the day, before I'd made that bridge over to creative arts, because I served in creative arts, or I was still doing things there while I was working in communications, all of the content that I got from the weekend is what we were using in communications to promote for the weekend, to promote ministries, to do all the things. And so to me, it was always a natural connection, right? Like, we need to have people on the weekend, so we're getting the content that we need for the week. Plus, the communications team is making all of the videos that go into the weekend. They're making all the graphics. They're doing all of the things that support the weekend services. So it kind of made sense after a while to say one single person should be over the two directors of those ministries so that everything is more cohesive. There's more collaboration. There's less of a like, well, that's that team and that's this team. No, we're all one team. We're all working towards the same goal and supporting the weekend and supporting ministries. So how do we do that better? So that was like that defining decision of like, okay, we think we needed to make it happen, but I think it took having the right leader who understood the importance of those two things. And that back then it was Clayton, and now that's Zach, who can say, I know enough of those worlds to bring them together in a really collaborative way.
Yeah. And you also need a leader who can cast the vision for the unified sort of voice and look and ethos and creative style of the church.
Correct.
Because, you know, communications might have their vision, production, and they might have their, you know, whatever.
Yep.
And you have to somehow bring that together into something and say, hey, we all have the things we like, but this is where we as an organization are going and how that needs to be expressed in these different areas. Yeah. And that can be a minefield to walk and a lot to navigate.
Yeah. And I feel like I mean, when we made that shift, you know, obviously the meetings got longer with more people in there, but the buy-in I think that we all got to have when we hear the video guy who's shooting and editing these videos that we're going to do for a big service or a weekend or a conference or something like that, you know, we're like, oh, we understand it now. We're not just like seeing it for the first time on a Thursday night at rehearsal. We're going, oh, okay, this could work. And I think the collaboration for that, you know, you win and lose as a team, right? Like if something goes well, awesome. We all celebrate that. And when we, you know, didn't hit it, it's not like, oh, just communications screwed up on that video or we screwed up on that video, you know, playing it back or something like that.
Yeah.
It's, you know, we're winning and losing as a team. And when you were talking about that, it made me think of like, Chris Community is we had a really good like target of like where we're going for like services or large events. And there was a handful of times, and I think of my last Easter when we had lots of plans and it was all perfect. And then I think it was like noon or 1 p.m. on that Saturday. And we're like, hey, we're cutting this element that we worked like, I remember doing math in my head of how many hours and, you know, from both of our teams and going, oh my gosh. But I saw you respond in that way in a way that I wasn't responding. Because it hit all of us really hard. And one of the things that I think I've seen you do like so well is like like you led our team through that really hard thing where we were all very frustrated going, man, why do we have to cut this? We all kind of understood why we were cutting it, but we didn't want to accept that we
still didn't want to do it.
We still didn't want to do it because we made it, right? It was a piece of work that we had created and worked really hard on and rehearsed, and now we're switching all of it up, you know, like 3 or 4 hours before the first Easter service on, you know, that year. Do you feel like you're still doing some of those things and like navigating that with the team, like when changes are happening? And like, I don't know. I just think back to that a lot, and I think about you and the way that you led, and I was just like, that's great, because I needed that.
Or where's your headspace when you approach those moments? Because the reality is they come inevitably now and then.
Yeah.
So like, how are you approaching that? And what does it look like for you
Mhm.
to interact with leadership at that point, and then also to kind of filter it in a helpful way to the team that you're leading?
Yeah. I think at the end of the day, like as someone who is a creative, I am that, but then I also have this leadership mindset as well. So I have this ability to live in both worlds. And I think my team understood that I knew what it felt like to put in hours and a lot of passion and time into something that we were really excited about, and then have that change gears. So I felt that, but then to kind of say, okay, hey, I know how this feels, right? Like I know that we were excited about that and that we thought that this was going to be the moment that the entire service hinged on, right?
Yeah.
But we've got to remember that like God's still going to use the service. If this is what leadership thinks is going to be best for the service, for what they have in their heart and their mind, we've got to believe that the Holy Spirit in this moment could be doing something different than maybe what we thought was like on our plate, right? What we were going to head into. And I think it's just how it's making sure that they remember what's most important. And maybe the element that we created or the video or the song or the whatever is maybe not always the most important thing, but it's understanding that whatever that service is going to be, as long as we are saying, all right, God, we're giving it to you fully. If our pastors think that this is the best thing to do, we're going to honor that and we're going to trust that you're going to use it anyway. And I will say that service, I liked the service better after we cut the element. And so we all were able to step back. So when things like that happen, you step back and you go, oh, okay. This is one of those moments where you can look back and go, all right, we can trust sometimes that we don't always have the full picture. That again, the Spirit is speaking to our leaders and we have to trust them to be guiding us in a different direction too. So in that case, you go, all right, we're going to collaborate. We're going to do the thing. We're going to make the change. We step back. We went, wow, that was beautiful.
Yeah.
That was better than what we thought.
Yeah.
Like we like that better. Yeah. And so I think when moments like that happen, then you can point back to them and you can say to your team, hey, do you remember when? And then they go, oh yeah. Okay. So then it's not all about the thing all the time. Yeah. It's just about doing what we think is going to be honoring.
Because it's easy to say that we're going to like respond in that way before it happens.
Yeah.
And then it happens and you go, oh yeah, of course we're going to want to honor our leaders and we want to listen to what the Holy Spirit might be, speaking to them and just going, hey, we're going to switch this up. And we say ahead of time, of course we're going to respond. And of course we're going to like not be stupid about that. But I found myself being very frustrated in that moment and just going, okay. But, I remember that Saturday night debrief and we're like, I think it was better. Yeah. Gosh dang it. I wanted it to not be because I wanted to be right. And I wasn't. And, I think it just goes back to, winning and losing as a team and just going, hey, we're going to all do this together. And it's not leadership against blank team or, blank team against, communications against production or whatever.
And the posture is collaboration. It always comes back to that. It's like I live by this 4C framework. It's consideration, communication, collaboration, and celebration, right? And so like my
spoken like a pastor, right?
Exactly.
Right. Yeah.
Force, it's just the alliteration,
like
right?
Your sermon points.
Which you've got like we're always going to start with consideration. So when I enter into that conversation with the pastor, right, and they say, hey, we think that this is going to be best for the service, right? Well, then I'm going to ask questions. I'm going to try to understand why before I seek to make them understand what I think my way, the old way would be better. So it's just a lot of good communication. It's asking a lot of questions. It's seeking to understand why, right? And then that still doesn't mean though that I might go like, okay, we can do that. Like I remember where there were times where I'm like, I don't know if we can do that. Like the reason why, and then again, I'm going to communicate back. The reason why we wanted to do X, Y, or Z this way was because we thought this was going to lead to this outcome, right? And then, again, they communicate back. They say, okay, well, we feel this, right? And so it's just this communication, and there's got to be a lot of trust there. There has to be a good enough relationship that back and forth can happen. But then you also got to go, at some point, you go, okay, all right. Hey, I've spoke my piece. I understand where they're coming from. They understand where I'm coming from. If they feel strong enough about this, then I am going to, like I said, I'm going to say, all right, my leaders are also being led by the same Holy
Mhm.
Spirit. They're doing something different. He's like, let's just move in that direction. Let's
Yeah.
see how this works. And there's always this thing is like, hey, if this doesn't work out, we can always go back to the old
Mhm.
way.
Yeah.
Yep.
Right? Or if this worked out, well, then there's no reason to go back to the old way because this
Yeah.
is beautiful. This
Yeah.
is great. So it's just making sure that you're not holding so tightly that you're not open to what else could be happening.
Yeah.
Yeah. And for leaders too that find themselves in a position of having a team that they might be suggesting a change to, right? When that happens periodically at different times too, it's like also on your side trying to seek to understand.
Yeah.
How did the team envision this working in the service? How did the team work on this? How does it fit in the message? How much time was spent on that?
Mhm.
So that when you're making an ask like that, you are weighing it appropriately within the context of
Yep.
like, what is it worth and what did it take? And if with that good, healthy communication, that full understanding, it's still like, yeah, the right decision is to go this way.
Mhm.
That's great. Sometimes it may be the opposite where they're like, oh, wow, that's with that context, you know,
Yeah.
here's how it
Mhm.
you know, we should actually use it in this way. But again, it's like you said, it's that communication, that back and forth and helping both parties understand a full picture of what
Yeah.
the weight of a decision might be in any given moment.
In your relational equity with leadership, you'd been there for 15,
Mhm.
14 years at the time.
Yeah.
Like it goes a long way.
Yeah.
Because you're like, hey, like I know how this person is thinking and I know what they're doing in their brain. I also have seen these decisions have been made in the past, and this is how the outcome is. And I think it helped us who didn't have that relational equity, who hadn't been there for, 10 plus years, to understand and go, okay, I have to listen and understand that like, what, if it's not my way or the highway. And it's very easy for people to say that, we want change, but as I've gotten older, I don't like change very much. I just don't. I used to say that I do, and I go, I don't actually think I do at all.
Yeah.
And yeah, it just speaks a lot to that. And I think there's a lot of people, that we've talked to that even listen to the podcast that are just like, it's the same scenario. It's the exact same thing in another church, and just going, hey, we have to trust that leadership is giving us vision that,
Mhm.
is where we want to go. And what's hard is when you have people on the team who just don't believe that, and the culture, aspect of that can be really, really hard to break. And I think that you and I spent a lot of time, when I was there, working through a lot of that with our teams and just
Mhm.
going, we have to, understand the culture and the vision of where leadership is going, and we have to be on board with that. And then
Yeah.
go, how do we use our skills and our gifts that God's given us in our own, context and the roles that we play at the church to help execute that vision?
Mhm.
But it's not easy at all.
No, sometimes it's not. And sometimes it is in other seasons, because other seasons can seem more clear than
Mhm.
others. Or sometimes when there's new things that are happening, you can say, okay, I think I know what the culture is. I think I know what it's going to be. And then you're kind of grasping around trying to get your bearings,
Mhm.
and you're kind of figuring out as you go in certain seasons. And so I think it can be harder
Mhm.
in new seasons.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of people too, like even with new people joining a team, that changes the culture as well.
Mhm.
Because also new people don't have the same awareness or track record with leadership or other people on
Yep.
staff. And so that adds a whole new dynamic, because they
Mhm.
have to, while maybe 30, 40% of the staff have this track record, they know what's what.
Mhm.
You've got a couple new people that come in and go, okay, am I just supposed to kind of take your word for it?
Mhm.
Am I supposed to but I'm kind of seeing this, or I feel this.
Mhm.
And it's hard. It can be a hard dynamic, but that's where that relational equity comes in. It's where you have to work really hard on the relationship side of it first before you can kind of come in and be
Mhm.
like, I'm going to change this or do
course.
this or do that, So,
Because it's very, very hard. And
Mhm.
I say that all the time. I always, have wanted to be the guy that walked in that didn't touch anything for at least 90 days,
Yeah.
and just go, let me ask questions. Like we had a guest on yesterday who was saying, I don't want to tear down the fence before I realize why it was built, because and there's a lot of that, Christ Community is a perfect example of a church that's been around a long time,
Yeah.
a very, very long time, that was built before that suburb of Chicago was really developed at all. It was a bunch of cornfields around it. And now
That's
it's, huge, and it's, the center of a great area. But realizing that, and I remember having these conversations with you and going, the people who are, in this teaching role or whatever who's teaching and we want to do this, like they've been teaching longer than I've been alive.
Yeah.
And so I'm not going to change the way that my senior pastor provides their notes or gives me their feedback, or I just won't. And I can't try to. And I think so many people try to like get them to change. And I don't think that's our place. And it's taken me a while to maybe realize that.
Now you're the guy who is kind of old and doesn't like change.
I totally am.
We can't get you to change anything.
I'm curmudgeon now.
Yeah.
There's been times where I've listened to this podcast episode. I'm like, wow, that just came out of Kaleb's mouth.
He's so grown up.
Like what?
He's so grown up.
What has happened?
It's amazing.
It's like, yeah. When you're in it, it's hard to not see anything but what is like the things that are going like around you. And it's hard to get yourself out of that bubble and look in from a different perspective and go, oh, this isn't that bad. Like, and this isn't like the end of the world. Whatever decision that I think is the end of the world, like is not.
Yeah.
But when you're in it every day and you're with your team who's, on site and we're prepping for Christmas or Easter and we're there 60, 70 hours, doing something, it's hard to not pull yourself out of that and look at it from a different perspective. It's a thing. But
well, that's all that kind of segues into the next, I think, phase of the conversation, which is that aside from your work with the church, you do this whole other thing.
I do.
And you do some coaching, some training, some work with leaders and helping them process through some of the same situations that we were just talking about. So why don't you tell us a little bit about that aspect of your work and kind of where it started and how it looks today?
Yeah. When I'm not doing with my team, yes, I do get the incredible privilege of doing it with other leaders and other teams. So that came out probably, it was pre-COVID, was the idea. That was the initial burst of the idea. Like, hey, maybe I should do this coaching thing on the side, and done it sporadically with people that I'd known. But I was like, maybe we're going to do it. And then COVID hit. And then we had to relearn our jobs. So we were working remote. We were going in Friday. We were recording episodes, editing them for the weekend. There was no way to do anything new. And so I waited a while. 2022 came around, was still doing some coaching on the side, and decided to just kind of take a step out. So started an LLC, made it legit, launched the creative level, and just started putting it out there, which is a very intimidating thing. When you say hey, I'm still doing this over here. Like I'm still the creative arts pastor at Christ Community Church, but I'm doing this thing over here. You can hire me to help you develop your leadership. It takes a little while for people to see you as the thing that you say that you are. Yeah. They can know that, oh yeah, Nikki's a really good leader. Oh yeah, she helps develop people. But when you start saying I'm a leadership coach, they're like, yeah, but what does that mean?
Totally.
And so then you've got to figure out how to talk about yourself, you know what I mean? And say how you help people. And it's this whole other persona that you have to put out there. So that was the journey 2022 of just launching it and talking about it, and also figuring out what does that journey kind of look like, because it was unfolding as I go. You can be a lot of different, you can be a life coach, a business coach, a risk coach, a leadership coach. Yep. What is the thing? And for me, my degree in leadership that I got from Moody had an emphasis in psychology with leading teams specifically. So it was how do you understand people? How do you understand what motivates them? And how do you help them grow to basically be their most effective selves in the psychology of all of that, right? So for me, my leadership development took the place of emotional intelligence. And all of the frameworks that house into that. And so I started to figure out that that's kind of where I was going to lean. And it was, I think emotional intelligence, it gets thrown out so often that I think it's become white noise almost oh yeah, high EQ, you got to have that,
It's just the boilerplate on every job description.
Yeah, right. But I think at the end of the day, it can mean a lot of different things because there's so many models out there and everybody thinks of it a little bit differently. But the way that I summarize it to people is it's all about how you show up at work and in life. It's about having awareness about yourself and others' awareness of the people around you to know how you affect yourself and how you affect other people, and then how to manage yourself accordingly, how to manage yourself so that you're the best self for yourself,
Mhm.
but also for other people around you. And the biggest thing that I think people miss in that is how it's our communication. So communication is a big thing for me. Like I consider myself pretty good
Mhm.
with communication, communicating with other people. But when I really dove into it, it's the interpersonal stuff. It's the soft skills. And if you are a new leader, if you are a seasoned leader and you've been in management or leadership for a long time, if you don't have those soft skills, interpersonal type stuff, you're just not going to be
Yeah.
successful.
Mhm.
And so I loved taking this approach with emerging leaders, but I do it with people of all ages, but also not just individually one-on-one, but also with their teams. Like I've got an assessment that I created called communication styles, and it basically just breaks down like what are the 4 or 5 different communication styles, which one do you live in, what's your
Mhm.
primary, what's your secondary, and then we do it with teams and we learn how to help teams communicate better with one another. And so I just kind of jumped into this and I said, I'm going to figure it out as I go. And communication ended up being where I landed, helping individuals and teams learn how to communicate better with each other. So that's where my leadership development kind of sits at. So a lot of the situations I coach through is like, all right, tell me about what you experienced.
Mhm.
And it always comes back to how that person is showing up either in their verbal communication, their nonverbal communication, because even when we're not communicating, we're still
yeah.
communicating
Oh, yeah.
something. And people, I don't think, when you're in that moment, they don't get it.
Yeah.
So when we talk about those moments and we break them down and then trying to help people, giving them frameworks to navigate those situations differently, and then hearing later
Mhm.
how that changed in their mind, or they even had the words
Yeah.
to put to something that they didn't have before. That is the best thing in the world.
Yeah.
When you can say, hey, that hour-long conversation that you had with me, these 2 frameworks that we discovered or that we went through and that I discovered, I applied them in my meeting with my boss and this was the outcome.
Yeah.
And I was like, yes, like that's what it's about. So that's where that's how that journey happened. That's where we are right now. So
That's awesome.
Do you find yourself working mostly within like Christian ministry space or business space, or kind of what is the context there?
right now it's still in Christian ministry. There was probably about a good 6 months where I tried to intentionally get out of the ministry sphere and kind of broaden. And then I had a couple people go, why are you doing that? Like church is your world, right? And there's a lot of younger emerging church leaders, whether they're in creative spaces or not, who need someone that can help them develop in those skills. So like, why are you doing that?
Yeah.
Like the rest of that's going to come later.
Yeah.
Like stick with what you know, help the people that you know. And I was like, okay,
Yeah.
kind of like a slap in the face almost,
Yeah.
where you're like, okay, all right, we're going to go back to
that's
what we
good.
know.
So you talk to a lot of young leaders.
Yeah.
And leaders that are sort of figuring out who they are, what their place is. What are some of the patterns or commonalities or like common pain points or walls that you see young leaders facing when they come and begin a conversation with you?
Yeah, I think a lot of it has to do with a lack of confidence. They're not really sure. They either lack the confidence in how they should own their space, or they're going to overcompensate and try to be too competent and come off really cocky in their space, which is not good either. They lack the ability to understand how to approach conflict properly, how to communicate with not only with their teammates, but mostly higher level leadership. Because regardless of like what your role is, in some way, shape, or form, you're going to interact with higher level leadership. And it's either going to go well or it's not. And so that's a couple areas. But I also think a lot of times what I hear my clients say is they say, I don't have the words to even understand what it is that like I'm encountering in this moment, whether it's with my team or my boss. Like there's something happening in this space, and I don't have the words to know how to even get myself out of it or how to fix the situation. And so what they do is they just stay quiet. And then they get into a situation where they're unhappy or they're frustrated or they're burnt out or they don't know how to communicate what they're experiencing or not experiencing or what they need or what they don't need. And so they just leave and they go to another place because they think it's going to be better But the situation is still the same situation, because if you don't have the words, you don't have the communication skills, the conflict management skills, the collaboration skills, the emotional intelligence to step into that space and navigate whatever comes at you, you're going to end up in the same spot.
Yeah.
And so really it starts with self-awareness. Every time I enter into a relationship with a client, we do a self-awareness assessment, because if they are not aware of their weaknesses, their strengths, their opportunities for growth, I'm not going to get very far with them.
Yeah.
They're not going to understand what they need and what they don't need. And then from there, I focus a lot on, I start with empathy, because it's like, if you're not good with other people, if you don't have the ability to understand how to approach other people, you can't get really far. That's a make or break in any situation. Forget work. It's like also life.
Yep.
Like that's just being a good human being.
Yep.
So those are pretty much the two areas, because if those are lacking, they're not going to have good relationships.
Yeah. And I like that you're doing it with teams. I think like the first time I ever went through that, I think it was with our whole staff at one of the churches I was on staff at. And, every church, does these like, oh, hey, we're bringing in a guy and they're going to do an assessment for us.
And it's always a guy. Right.
Or somebody.
Yeah.
And there's a billion different like assessment and tests that are out there, right? And like, anything from DISC to Strengths Finders and Enneagram and, all of the things. Enneagram, I think, is a good example, at least for me, of Enneagram is very easy to, I'm a 6, I can call you whatever number you are, like, classic 8, and every other executive pastor on the planet, or whatever.
All you 8s out whatever, there, whatever you are.
You do know who you are. But it helps me. Like, I remember like why in the world can I not like figure out how to communicate with my executive pastor? Realizing that like me and the 6, like I will beat around the bush as much as humanly possible to soften the blow, to like kind of ask what I'm asking for, but not really like being direct enough. And my 8 Enneagram executive pastor is just like, dude, just tell me what you're thinking right now. Like, stop beating around the bush. This is an hour-long conversation that I have no idea what you're even like asking for. And then the same for, any other people on your staff, and just going, oh, this is why I have to talk to this person this way, because this is how they need to receive either criticism or feedback and ask for something. And this is how they need to hear that for them to respond differently. And so for me to be able to walk into a different situation and go, oh, okay, this is the energy that I have to either match or not, or chill my energy way down to have this conversation with this person who, is whatever, number. And so I like that from a team, perspective. And I think it's just like, it's so needed, I think, for every church to do, but every team on an individual level. And I think as a church as a whole, because I can figure out how to talk to my guys on my team, but I might not know how to talk to the children's pastor at all. Yeah. And what they need for, me to help understand what their needs are and stuff like that. But I think it's a great way to look at it from, doing the team's perspective.
Yeah. And it's the self-awareness, and that's the others awareness thing. You know that about yourself. You know that about the person you're talking to. You're going to manage yourself differently.
Yeah.
And even if they don't have that awareness, you can do that.
Yeah.
Like you can lead up or lead across or lead down or do whatever in order to make sure that conversation is productive.
Yeah.
So that's where it comes
from. What are sort of the, when you start a conversation like this with a leader, or even within a team maybe, and you start to kind of lay out some of these steps, some of these practices, what are sort of the pushbacks or fears that come up as people start to have to flex a muscle that they maybe haven't used before, or step into a conversation that, they've got this tool that you've told them, but they still have to go do a conversation that they, don't really want to do. Like, what do you see kind of come up as resistance or hesitation as people are trying to kind of live into a better way of communicating?
I think the biggest one is lag time. Like, it's delay.
That's good.
I keep telling them, like, the shorter that you lessen that time up, right? Like, the shorter that gap is of like the incident or the conversation, and you discover there's a problem, and you know that there's a solution, or you need to go find a solution. Like, hey, this was the interaction we had. I'd like to clear it up, whatever. It's this gap. There's a major gap, and they move too slow. And I always say like the more you can lessen that gap, the better everything's going to be.
Yeah.
But there's fear in that. There is insecurity in that. I mean, I think of myself like when I first decided that I was going to, I don't even remember how many years ago this was. I was going to get better at conflict resolution. That's it. Like I need to get better at this. The first thing I did was ask myself, like, why are difficult conversations so difficult for me? I had to start with the why. And I if I can remember off the top of my head, I jotted down a couple reasons. I said, like, I don't want to come off as an insecure person, meaning I don't want that person to think that I am making a bigger deal out of something that in their eyes they wouldn't see as a big deal. I don't want to come off like it's fear. Like, how is this going to affect our relationship? Like, am I going to be received properly? Like, are they going to be responsive to it? Or are they going to be like, you're crazy? Like,
Yeah.
And then the other one was like, I lacked the courage to even start the conversation. So like, how many times do we like rehearse in our minds? I'm going to say this. It's going to go this way. If it would go this way, then I'm going to say this instead. And then you're like, all right, I'm going to do it. And you're like, like I couldn't even open my mouth. And so a lot of people have said like, that's also a struggle for them. Like they know that they need to get better at having better communication with their team, better communication with their boss, but they feel those same things in no particular order. But the biggest one is I don't have the courage to start. And so when they don't have the courage to start, that's when the lag time in any one of these disciplines happen, because it's always like, well, I don't want to try it because I don't want to fail at it. Then I always try to tell them, like, if you don't try it, you're never going to learn. If that first time you're going to do it, you're going to learn something from it every single time you do it. It's not a failure. It's an opportunity to learn. And so that's the biggest thing. You present a framework, they go, oh, I see it.
Yeah.
And they work it out with you. And then it's like, hey, how did that go? Oh, I didn't get a chance. I didn't do it. I didn't get a chance to do it. I got really busy, or the conversation didn't go that way. And like, okay, well, next week, you know what I mean? So it's just accountability.
And like, I think of myself in that, and I go, if I respond very quickly, that almost always is not the thing that I should say.
Yeah.
But then it's easy to go, I'm going to pause. I'm going to wait to have this conversation until I chill out and I say it in a better way. And then as time goes on, it gets harder and harder to go back to have that conversation. And I don't know what it is at like church staff and ministry, but like people just like they beat around the bush about everything. We withhold conflict. We talk about it and bicker in our teams about something
with
that
the people
happened,
you feel safe with
the people we feel safe with. And then we know it has the massive repercussions of just like turning culture very, very sour very quickly, because you write your own stories. If you're not having those conversations, you will write your own story about the reason why that blank person said this or did this or whatever. And then we just continue to complain about it with our team. And then something else happens 3 weeks later and we'll just continue to complain about it. And it either blows up or we just shove it under the rug and we just become really nasty people.
I think that's just such an important thing to note when you're a leader that's kind of in the middle of the organization and you've got leaders above you and you're leading your own team. Part of that leadership mantle, right, is bearing the weight of that for your team. And when that kind of conversation starts to happen, there's probably some real like valid thoughts or complaints or things that need to be addressed within that conversation. For you to be able to say, hey guys, here are the things that we should get some clarity on and get addressed. I'm going to take that and bring that to our leader and we'll kind of share our perspective and, find a path forward. So now your ability to have the courage of that conversation is not just related to your role, but it's this whole team that you're representing. And so again, it just reinforces the importance of that skill set, that development of communication, that courage. Because if you're going to step into one of those roles, you're now responsible for, more than just yourself and more than just your work environment and your experience.
Yeah.
The question I have about that though is like, maybe I said it to you over the years, like, we acted as shields for our team sometimes, where we would hear something and we're gonna reword how this was said to us to our team, because if I say it the exact same way, it will not be. Everybody will be as frustrated as I am.
Yeah.
But over time, like I remember having this very hard conversation with my team years ago and going, my shield is broken and I can't, like I'm having a really hard time sifting the words and saying them to you in a way that you should hear and not the way that they were told to me. And as that middle leader, I mean, my shield's been broken down a lot. And it's really, really hard to, once you start letting that stuff slip through, we've had those conversations. You're like, oh, I probably shouldn't have said this to you. And I am frustrated. And I've done the same to the guys that were on my team. And I go, I probably shouldn't have told you that, this was said to me in this way.
But how many times that leading up to your shield being broken, right? Did a leader share something with you that you were like, ooh, that would not come across well to my team. I'm gonna have to filter that. But then as a leader to say back to your senior leader, hey, thanks for that feedback. I'm going to bring it to my team. Just so you know, the way that that's framed really would be not well received or hurtful, or would have probably not the way I like to say it is that probably wouldn't come across the way you would want, right? Leader, you want it to come across in a edifying, helpful, a way that encourages the growth of the people underneath you, right? So just so you know, that wouldn't probably be received well. Here's maybe why. Just wanted you to know, you go do your thing. If you do that consistently, hopefully, like you can only control yourself, but hopefully, again, as we were talking earlier about helping a leader have the full picture and not it's not doing them any service to withhold the information from them about how their approach might be perceived. Again, that may or may not have any effect, but at least you're giving them the information for them to do something with.
And I'm horrible at that, by the way. I'm really bad at that.
Well, you know what? You should read Nikki's book.
I should. Okay, so to your book.
Oh, gosh.
You are now an official author.
I know. Look at that thing.
I'm very, very happy and proud of you.
It's really bright, isn't it?
I love it.
This shade of yellow, by the way, is very in right now.
It is very in. Big blocky letters. Yeah.
It is.
Okay, so tell us about the book. How did you get there? You said you mentioned like you had been writing and working on stuff. The coaching stuff, happened, and I was around when you were doing some of the business stuff, and then going back into ministry circle.
Yeah.
But I like when I got the text from you, I'm like, oh, she wrote a book. She did a thing. Tell us about how you got there.
Well, I didn't get there with the intention of writing a book. Like I know there are some people who are like, I'm going to write a book, and they sit down and they write it. That was never my intention. I always thought it was cool. I remember us having conversations. You were like, if I ever wrote a book, I would call it this. You remember what you would call it?
People over gear.
Yeah, people over gear. And I thought, and I would always say, well, write the book, Kaleb. And you're like, But I never set out to write it. What I did write, though, was a curriculum for my coaching. And I wrote a curriculum for a cohort. And little by little, I started and I did it with workshops. I would use the same thing with workshops. And there was a moment where I was in, I don't remember, I was at a conference and I was sitting in a session and this guy was talking about something and he's like, if you want to have a deeper dive into this, you can buy my book, right? And he put it up on the thing and I had this moment where I went, wait a minute. I was like, I don't need to buy his book because everything that he just put in this session were things that I already knew just under my frameworks or frameworks that I had discovered over the course of my schooling and all that stuff. And I was like, wait a minute, I have a book. It's all of my curriculum. I was like, where did this guy come up with his book? It's probably it's the same curriculum because he just said, if you want to dive deeper into this, you can read my book. And I had this moment where I was like, I got to go write a book. Right. And awesome. So I sat down and I had everything written. It took a lot of time to edit this thing, though, because, again, everything was pretty much there. But what was missing was some more stories, or it was very much in a speaking tone, I'm going to speak this to people, not so much in a reading type of tone. And so I had to do a lot of work on it to kind of adjust it for the book. But this is essentially over the course of my entire education, 10 years on staff at Christ Community, longer before that with the schooling, basically diving into all the things over the course of my leadership journey, the frameworks that I've found, the things I've created on my own that have helped me become the leader that I am today. And so I mentioned it earlier, that 4C framework: consideration, communication, collaboration, celebration. That is the framework of the book. And then all of the frameworks, that's the major framework, and then all these other little frameworks that exist within each one of those big buckets, we'll say, are things, like I said, that I found or I've created. And if you maximize those areas, it's pretty much like the baseline, if not even more than the baseline of what you would need to be a really impactful leader. Because there's so much stuff out there, guys.
Yeah.
Like when we type in like leadership development, like where do you start?
Yeah.
Right? Like what podcasts do you listen to? What articles can you read? Like you can spend, and I have spent with my education and then just working it out after, like thousands upon thousands of hours and a lot of money, right? Through an education and also certifications, like learning how to level up my leadership, right? But I go down these rabbit trails all the time where I start to learn one thing and I go, is that what do I really need to be spending my time there right now? And so this book, like I said, just years of saying, I believe, I truly believe, because I've seen it in my life, but also in the people that I've been developing over the course of a few years now. If you maximize yourself in these areas, you're going to be exactly where you need to be. It's going to give you a good start. So that's what the book's about.
That's awesome. Because I mean, you're very right. There's so much leadership noise out there. You can Google, you can go to, you type in leadership into your Apple podcast, and you're just like, oh my gosh, like what in the world am I supposed to, listen to right now? And I think there's this, like I have gotten tired over the years of like, okay, what other book am I supposed to read, or what other book am I going to listen to the point where I'm like, I don't want to do any of that. I just want to listen to a funny podcast because it can be exhausting, right? To constantly do that. And there was a guy that I was with in September of last year, and one of the things that he was saying in this like workshop that I was at was, when you stop working on yourself in your own leadership, like, and it makes so much sense, but like your team can fall apart. Like your growth as a leader completely stops if you're not working on yourself. So how in the world are you gonna coach your team or lead your team if you're not, trying to develop yourself or grow at all? And I think because there's so much noise, it can be like, where do I even start? And I'm just gonna stop. And what I like about this is it's a framework. It's a outline of how to do this. And it's not this, we have to read 10 books and we have to go through all this, and we're going to go through 6, 8-hour meetings with our team and do all those things. And those are all great, but they're tiring. And I think, as you continue to work on yourself, and you will only get better. So I love that you're able to do that.
Well, and I also, the thing that I really dislike about books and podcasts and workshops is when you step into one or you open one up, right? Or you put one on and you're like, okay, this is promising that I'm going to learn this. And then all you get is like this general overview of it. I've always hated that. It's like a bait and switch, right? So for me, I'm all about moving people to application. So when I set out to say, okay, I'm going to do this, even when it was like these free workshops that I do on occasion, every month, there's like a free workshop, the podcast episodes, anytime that I coach with somebody, even like you do like a discovery call with somebody. Like I'm going to get as practical into the how-to as I can, because that's what I'm here for. And if not, then I'm wasting your time and I'm wasting my time. So the book was like, I want this to be something that when people pick it up, they have things that they can actually do in the book, they can work through in the book, and they can apply it that very next day or that same day, depending on when they're reading it, or that week, like whatever. It's a field guide. I didn't want it to be a general principle leadership book.
The cool thing about it too is like with the focus on communication and that interpersonal relational building, it's so applicable to anyone, right? It doesn't matter what field you're in, what specialty you have, what niche you work in. Odds are you still probably interact with other humans. So it's going to be helpful, and it's going to make you more effective, and it's going to make people want to work with you more and want to be a part of what you are developing. And
Yeah.
so
Mhm.
it's a powerful tool.
Yeah, it's fun. It's been fun to write. I'm excited to get it into people's
It's awesome.
hands.
Where do people find this book if they want to find out more?
So it's coming out on August 12th, and they're going to be able to buy it right off of Amazon. So there's just paper book right now, paperback. Is that how you say that? Yeah,
Yeah,
paperback.
paperback,
I know how
yeah.
to say that.
Yeah,
paper
it's
book,
great.
paperback.
I like paper
It is
book.
a paper book.
It is a
It is
paper
paper
book.
Accurate.
It's available there on Amazon August 12th, and then I think like that day or the next day there'll be a ebook coming out. But
That's so
Awesome.
good.
for some people who like digital,
Yeah.
I'm a
Yeah.
paperback reader. Though.
So what's like, because this is interesting, because I've thought about doing things like this, but what is your personal what would be a win in a year from now, like for you, like with this? Because I think of the people that have the heart to do things like this, that listen to this podcast and just go, I don't know where to start. The courage, I love the word like courage that you talked about earlier, of just being able to go and have a conversation.
Yeah.
But the courage to go and just go, I'm going to throw myself out there. I'm going to try to do something new.
Yeah.
For your win in a year, like how would you encourage like other people to go, if I wanted to do this, how can I do that with my team? Or, even just like, I don't know what it is for anybody listening, but you know what it is if you're listening, and the thing you want to try,
The thing you've been putting off for 6
Yes,
months that
yes.
you're supposed to do.
or 2 years or 10 years,
Yeah. I would say it's just start. Like there's so many times that we feel like we have to have the perfect plan and the perfect outline, and everything's got to be perfect, the circumstances, the conditions. And a lot of times we're never going to get to that place. We just have to start and then be willing to adjust as we go, knowing that there's going to be some things that we try and they're really going to work, and some are going to be just okay. And then there's other times where it's going to fall flat, and we've got to be okay with that.
Yeah.
Because if we don't, then we're never going to get to that place that we want to be. We're never going to move past the conversation or write the book or do the thing. We just got to start. And it's going to be intimidating and it's going to be hard. But then every time, I always say practice isn't perfect. It's progress.
Yeah.
And so perfection's impossible.
Yeah.
So you just got to start, and you got to go with it.
Yeah. I mean, I'm so good at waiting till something I think is like pretty close to perfect before this podcast is a perfect example. We talked about it in the first episode. I'm like, yeah, it took us a while. We've been working on this for a year. We probably got started, 3 months into that year. But we didn't, because I was, holding back and going, well, I want things to be this way or this way or this way. And that's for everything in life that I find myself doing. And I know that's not just me. Hopefully it's not just me that does that. But I think that throwing yourself out there in that and just going, hey, we will adjust. It's not like you can't do something else. You want to write another book, go write it differently. If you don't like the way it's like
just remembering that experimentation is the best form of feedback. If you want to figure out how to develop whatever the thing is you're doing, do some reps, get some iterations, and
I say this too, like a lot of times, like for young leaders, you got to imitate before you can innovate, right? Like everybody knows that. So you've just kind of got to, like I said, pick a place, pick a leader, pick a book, pick a whatever that you think is going to get you to where you can start, and then just do it. And then as you get more comfortable with it, you'll start to create your own approach or start to create your own frameworks. Like that's just what we do. It becomes the point to where we don't have to even try anymore. It's like second nature to us. And so, but until then, it takes a little bit of work. You got to find some people and some things that you can learn from and glean from, and then become your own person with it, become your own leader with it.
I think that just all, like the theme that I see just kind of through all the things we've talked about, whether it's young leaders starting a conversation or someone trying a new skill or someone taking a stab at a new thing, it's this idea of courage.
That's
like,
it.
will you take the step? Will you put yourself out there? Will you be courageous enough to accept feedback and implement feedback and admit that you don't know everything and that you still have a ways to grow?
Yeah.
And I think that, wherever someone finds themselves listening to this today, that's probably something that could encourage them and help them to take whatever their next step is, whether it's relationally in their family, with leadership, with that project that they've been thinking about. That
because if the next, specifically in church, if the next generation of ministry leaders don't do that now.
Mm-hmm.
In 20 years, when they're all the age of what our leaders are above us, I don't know what would happen to the local church. And so I think that's a testament to people who are thinking about going in ministry that haven't and should, and the people who are that are just going, what do I want to do, or I want to get out, to be able to just go.
Well, that makes me think of all the people that are a little further along in their leadership journey, or kind of thinking about maybe handing it off to someone else. Make sure that you're also someone that's encouraging and bringing along and helping to inspire and give confidence to those people, because your investment is going to be a big part of shaping how they view themselves. Can I do this? Do I have the ability to learn and grow? Or on the flip side, is my voice not welcome, and do I not have a place here? So older leaders have a big role to play in that.
Yeah, they do. That is who will be shaping the next generation. So if we don't take up that responsibility and develop leaders, then I don't know. You're right. I don't know what the next season of church leadership is going to look like. Obviously, God knows, because he's seen it. So it's going to happen regardless. But I do think there could be a much easier season for those younger emerging leaders than would be the case if they didn't have good people taking up that responsibility and leading them.
And just figuring out early. Like, I don't know, I think it was you that said it earlier, like being able to have a conversation with a leader and like hold your own. Like it took a very long time for me to be able to walk into a random executive pastor or a senior pastor's office and have a conversation and hold my own without knowing them. That's a very intimidating thing, and that could be a senior pastor, it could be a CEO, or whatever it is at any other organization. But I think if you can figure it out, your life will be much easier in ministry and elsewhere, just to be able to have those conversations. That's why I get very jealous of older people, because I'm like, how do you just like have that conversation and not care? My dad's a great example of that. Just going, oh.
Well, I think my hope would be that older leaders have conversations and they care very deeply. It's the leaders that don't care that actually have those conversations that are.
I mean it. By
I know what you mean. I'm just
not caring about how they are nervous to have that conversation.
Exactly.
The courage
they're not worried about their own image.
They're not worried about they're not worried about how they will come across.
Exactly. They're caring about what has to happen.
Exactly.
And it's about that outcome, and it's not about their personal. Whatever.
Yeah, makes sense. I think we keep saying courage too. I think there's two words you put together as well that communicate really well is just a confident humility. So like we can have confidence in who we are and who we think God's called us to and the calling that he's placed on us. But then at the same time, we have to have humility to know that we're never going to reach the top level of anything. We're never going to be the most educated, inspiring person in the room. We're never going to have the perspective or the worldview that everybody else does. That's what makes the church and any gathering or group of people, a collective, so powerful, is that they're not just relying on their own individual perspective or worldview or experience or whatever. It's about a collective. It's about a team of people. And you have to have confidence in who you are and humility to say, I'm not that, but you are. So let's do this thing together.
Yeah.
And I think that takes courage too.
It totally does. Yep.
It takes courage too.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's great.
Well, I'm very thankful that you came out here and hung with us for a couple hours and being able to talk about this. I'm very, I'm thankful for you. You're an incredible boss. I don't think I've had any other bosses on here. I don't know if I would actually bring any other bosses on here, if I'm being honest. But thank you. You're so good, and you lead that team super, super well at that church, and those guys respect you, and I respect you and care for you a lot. And I'm excited to see what is next through this book, through you, what you continue to do at the church. And
where can people follow you if they just want to keep track of what's going on?
Yeah, so they can go to thecreativelevel.com. That's the website where they can find all the information. And then there's buttons there that'll take you to the socials. But The Creative Level is on Instagram and Facebook. I don't really use the Facebook one all that much. Is that a thing, really?
Facebook is old.
I know, it's just there.
You just have all your Instagram posts automatically posted.
Exactly.
MySpace.com/creative level.
But I'm probably the most active on LinkedIn. So people
Nice.
can look
Okay.
me up on LinkedIn. But
Awesome.
like I said, just go to the website, cravelevel.com, and
I
all the
think I'm
buttons
logged
are
out
there.
of my LinkedIn and I forgot my password. So
Oh, well.
So LinkedIn is really funny to me because I was on there the other day. I don't know what it was. I don't know why I was on it. I was there and I was just like on the app, and it kind of looks like a social media app, I
Mhm.
think. But like every single post that I saw was like, let's congratulate Billy on being the new marketing director of blank, blank, blank. I'm like, that's weird. Like, why would? And then like I scrolled down and it was like, I think it's automated. Like I think when
Mhm.
people change jobs, like that's just like a weird post that goes out.
Yeah.
Because I think whenever I've updated it,
we're just
people
very
are
much
like,
outside of that
I don't know,
very
man.
true.
I'm just
LinkedIn
like,
culture, Caleb. We don't know
Yes.
what's up.
congrats. I was
Very
like,
true.
who are you? Fourth.
Do I wanna
like,
congratulate you?
You know, oh
Right.
my gosh, it's just so funny. So
If you love LinkedIn, it's cool. Like,
Yes.
go for
it's
it.
for some, yeah, I don't know. Maybe I should try it more.
Try
I
it
won't.
out.
I'm not
Try
gonna
it
To
out.
reset
Don't
my
try it.
password.
Yeah.
I get a message to be like, so and so sent you a message, and like, I can't read
I
this.
can't
I
read
can't
it.
log in.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Oh,
It's very, very
That's
funny.
sad. So,
Yeah.
I'm so sorry.
But anyways, you like LinkedIn, so people follow around LinkedIn. Just
I
don't
do.
follow us, Caleb, all right? Because
they
we're
won't
not
listen
on it.
to you. They can't log into the.
You know,
even
but
go
if
look
I
at
see
your
you
stuff.
send me a message on LinkedIn, I will reset my password for you and
Okay.
I will figure it out.
All right.
So there
I'm
you go.
gonna go do that.
I hope you do. I'll be watching for it.
Oh my gosh, it's so funny. Anyways,
Nice.
thank you.
Thank you for
being
having
here.
me, guys.
And
Absolutely.
until next time.
I'm proud of you.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it.